The living room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional crackle from the old radiator. Orrin sat in his worn armchair, the fabric faded from years of use, his hands resting gently on his knees. The afternoon light had thinned, filtered through dusty blinds, casting long slanted shadows across the coffee table. On it lay a stack of unopened bills and a single wrinkled $5 bill folded and tossed like an afterthought. Teresa stood with her arms crossed, lips pressed in a thin line. Her eyes were sharp, tired, and unforgiving. She pointed at the bills. $300 for electricity, $250 for gas. And that's not even counting groceries. Her voice cut through the room like a knife. Neil didn't even look up from the couch. He was sprawled out, half watching some daytime talk show, the kind with fake applause and too many commercials. Orrin glanced at him, wondering if Neil had ever truly worked a full-time job in his life. Teresa stepped closer, her tone rising. Your $1,200 barely gets us through the week, Dad. You sit here like nothing's wrong, but we're drowning. Orrin said nothing. He had learned that silence often spoke louder than defense. He had lived long enough to know that arguments born from money rarely ended with understanding. Maybe one of you could finally find a job, he said softly. The words barely landed before Neil snapped his head around. Are you saying I'm not trying? Neil's voice was low but carried that edge Orrin had come to recognize. I've been looking. It's tough out there for someone with my experience. Sales managers aren't exactly in demand. Teresa let out a sharp laugh. Neil's not the problem, you are. This pension of yours, it's just not enough. We need real income, not factory leftovers. Orrin looked at her. Really looked. Not at the lines on her face or the way she had stopped wearing the bright colors her mother once loved. He looked for the little girl who used to bring him wildflowers and tell him he was her hero. But she wasn't there. Not anymore. I worked 37 years at that factory, he said quietly. That pension supported your mother and me. It was enough then. Well, Mom's not here anymore, is she? Teresa shot back. And this house doesn't run on old memories. Neil stood now, looming over the coffee table. Maybe you should have thought of all that before you moved in here. His tone made it sound like Orrin had barged in uninvited. Orrin felt a dull ache deep in his chest, not the kind that warned of sickness, the kind that reminded him of disappointment. I sold my house, he said, helping you with your down payment. You asked me to come. You said it would be easier for all of us. That was 3 years ago, Teresa said, waving a dismissive hand. Things change. And they had. He remembered handing over the check. $150,000. Teresa had cried. Neil had clapped him on the back. They had promised him he would always have a place in their home. Always. Now Neil was doing the math out loud. Your share would be $800 in rent. You pay nothing. That's not fair to us. Teresa nodded. You're not contributing. You just exist here. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unkind. Orrin's hands gripped the edge of his chair. His mouth felt dry, but he refused to show hurt. So what are you suggesting? He asked. Neil and Teresa exchanged a look. One of those silent glances that spoke volumes. It chilled him more than the cold air slipping through the window panes. They had planned this. This was not spontaneous frustration. This was something rehearsed. We're saying, Neil said slowly, that you either contribute more or figure something else out. Teresa added, somewhere else to live. Orrin looked at her again. Still no little girl, only a stranger with his daughter's eyes. Outside, clouds had gathered, signaling the first real cold snap of the season. Inside, something equally bitter had taken hold. Teresa stood above him, hands on hips, waiting for an answer. Neil folded his arms, already wearing the expression of a man who had won. Orrin said nothing. There was nothing to say. Fine. Teresa turned toward the kitchen, then stopped. But you are not going to sit around all day feeling sorry for yourself. She dug into her purse, the clink of coins and rustle of paper loud in the silence. When she returned, she held out a crumpled $5 bill. Here, take this. Buy a lottery ticket. At least then you might be some use. Orrin looked at the bill. It trembled slightly in her fingers, as if even she felt the weight of what she was doing. He did not hesitate. He reached out and took it, folding it gently before placing it into his shirt pocket. "Thank you," he said. Teresa blinked as if caught off guard by his calm. "The convenience store on Land has those scratch-offs. Get something decent, not the dollar ones." Oren nodded. "I will." Standing up took more effort than it used to. His knees complained and his back cracked slightly. He moved to the coat closet, reaching for his heavy winter coat. "Where are you going?" Neil asked, still on the couch. "To buy a ticket," Oren replied. "Isn't that what was requested?" "You don't have to make it sound like we're sending you to prison," Teresa said. "Of course not." He wrapped his scarf carefully, loop by loop. Through the window, the sky looked like slate pressing down on the town. The air smelled of dead leaves and cold ground. Oren placed his hand on the doorknob. "Dad." Teresa said, her voice quieter now. "This isn't personal. No, I'm sure it's not. It's just practical," Neil added. "We all have to face reality. Reality." Oren nodded slowly. Yes, he thought. He was starting to see reality more clearly than ever. The house he had helped them buy was no longer his home. The promise of always had expired. The meaning of family had changed. "I understand," he said, and opened the door. The cold air rushed in, sharp and honest, the kind that cleared the mind. Teresa called after him. "Get the $5 tickets. Better odds. Better odds." He almost smiled. After today, he understood odds better than anyone. "I'll remember that," he said. The door clicked shut behind him. The porch steps creaked under his feet. He stepped onto the sidewalk, pulling his coat tighter. $5 in his pocket. $5 to buy a ticket. $5 to buy hope. But more than that, $5 to reclaim something no one else could give him back: his dignity. The cold was sharper than Oren remembered. It slipped through the seams of his coat, bit at his hands even through thick gloves, and settled deep in his bones. The streets of Elgin were nearly empty, save for the occasional car passing by with windows fogged and headlights glowing like dim promises. Each step he took crunched lightly against a thin layer of frost that had begun to settle across the sidewalks. He walked without hurry. There was no need to rush. The world around him moved as if in slow motion, the town quiet except for the hum of distant traffic and the low whistle of wind between the houses. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting golden circles onto the cracked pavement. Oren passed by familiar places. The old bakery, now boarded up. The corner where he used to wait for Teresa's school bus, coffee thermos in hand, no matter the weather. A man gets used to waiting, he thought. Used to showing up even when no one expects him anymore. Especially then. The $5 bill remained in his pocket, warm from his body heat. He pressed a hand over it almost protectively. It was not the amount that mattered. It was what it meant. Not money, but a sentence. A gesture that said, "We are done pretending you matter." He turned onto Mland Street, where the glowing red and green lights of the 7-Eleven greeted him like an old friend. The sliding door creaked open as he entered. Inside, warmth rushed to meet him. It smelled of microwaved burritos and coffee that had been sitting too long. A young man behind the counter looked up and gave a nod. "Evening, sir." "Evening," Oren replied. Romesh read the name tag. He was no more than 22, maybe a college student working nights. He had kind eyes, the kind that noticed things but never judged. "Cold one out there, huh?" "Sure is." Oren moved slowly toward the lottery display. Bright colors, big numbers, promises printed in glossy ink. He had never bought more than the occasional scratch ticket in his life. It always felt silly, but tonight it felt different. "Powerball, please." 3 tickets. Romesh tapped a few buttons on the machine. 3 separate slips, or all on one? "Separate, please. You got it. That will be 15. Oren pulled out the $5 bill from his shirt pocket. Then from his wallet he took out a 10. Romesh handed him 3 tickets, each printed with a line of hopeful numbers. Oren read them carefully, then took a pen from the counter. He wrote the names neatly. Teresa Hargrove on the first, Oren Peters on the second, and again, Oren Peters on the third. He folded them slowly, carefully. The one with Teresa's name he placed back into his shirt pocket. The other two he kept in the wallet tucked behind an old photo of Margaret. She looked young in that picture, laughing, alive in ways memory could barely hold now. Romesh tilted his head. Buying for someone special. Just keeping a promise, Oren said. Romesh smiled, then turned back to the counter. Well, good luck. Maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones. Oren nodded. Maybe I already am. He stepped back into the cold. The wind had picked up. He pulled his scarf higher, adjusted his gloves. The walk home would be darker now, streetlights flickering under a sky that had turned charcoal gray. But it didn't feel so heavy. As he walked, his mind turned inward. He remembered the day he gave Teresa the check. She had hugged him so tightly, crying into his shoulder. You will always have a place with us, she had whispered. We're family. Family. The word had felt warm then. Now it tasted bitter, but he did not carry anger. He carried something older, wiser, a quiet knowing that some debts cannot be paid in money. He passed by the old school building. The flag outside fluttered gently even in the still air. He wondered how many other fathers were out there tonight, walking streets where their children once ran free, remembering simpler years. He reached the corner where he used to stop for coffee every Friday. The place had changed names 3 times since. Now it was closed for the night, chairs stacked on tables, lights dimmed to a low glow. He paused a moment, looking at his reflection in the glass. 68 years. Not a young man. Not yet old enough to be invisible. Somewhere in between. Seen only when useful. He pulled the ticket with Teresa's name from his shirt pocket and looked at it. The ink was still fresh. Numbers bold and black. A small smile formed at the edge of his mouth. Not cruel, not smug, just knowing. He returned it to his pocket, then kept walking. By the time he reached the house, the sky had gone fully dark. Porch lights from neighboring homes flickered like candles in the wind. The front door stood quiet. No one opened it to greet him. No one had waited. He let himself in. Neil was still on the couch, half asleep, with the TV flickering colors across his face. Teresa was in the kitchen on the phone with someone laughing at something that no longer involved him. Oren hung up his coat, placed the folded tickets in his drawer, and went upstairs. In his small room, he sat by the window looking out at the backyard. The trees were bare, the ground hard, but above all of it, the stars had come out. Small, steady, quiet. He whispered aloud almost to himself. Justice does not shout. It waits. Tuesday evening arrived with the kind of hush that made sound carry differently. Outside, the sky had dimmed to a deep navy, and the houses along the street had begun lighting up one by one. In the living room, the television glowed against the wall, casting soft blue light across the furniture. Oren sat in his usual armchair, back straight, hands resting quietly on his knees. Across from him, Neil lounged on the couch with a bowl of pretzels. Teresa paced behind him, her phone in hand, refreshing the lottery results page every few seconds. The numbers were due any minute now. The Powerball drawing was the highlight of their week, not because they expected to win, but because it offered them something to talk about besides unpaid bills and long silences. Teresa stopped pacing and looked at the clock. It was time. The screen shifted and a familiar jingle played. The Powerball logo flashed across the screen, followed by a host in a bright red blazer announcing that tonight's jackpot had reached over $30 million. The room seemed to lean in. Here we go, Neil said, sitting up. Teresa pulled the ticket from her purse and held it tightly. The numbers began to roll on the screen. 7. She gasped. That's us. We have 7. 23. Yes. 31. Neil shouted. That's 3. We have 3. 42. Teresa was gripping the ticket so hard the paper crinkled. 58. She let out a short, almost choking laugh. That's 5. One more. And the Powerball is 12. There was silence, then an explosion of sound. We won. Oh my God. Neil stood up, dropping the pretzel bowl. We won. Teresa stared at the ticket, her hands shaking. It's all 6. All 6 numbers. She laughed, wild and high-pitched. This is it. We did it. Neil grabbed her, spinning her around. We are done with this house. No more budgeting, no more scraping. We are rich. They danced in the middle of the living room, the television still flashing winning numbers in the background. Oren watched them quietly. His face was calm, unreadable. He did not speak. Teresa stopped suddenly and looked at him. You hear that, Dad? We won, all thanks to that $5. Neil was already listing off ideas. New car, trip to the coast, maybe Europe, a bigger house, one with a real fireplace. Teresa turned toward Oren again, her expression shifting slightly. You know, Dad, this kind of changes everything. Does it? Oren asked softly. She nodded quickly. Yes. I mean, now we can finally get things in order. Maybe even look into assisted living options for you. Somewhere comfortable, Neil added, with a nurse. People trained to care for folks your age. Oren tilted his head. You mean to say somewhere else? Teresa hesitated. It's not personal. We need our own space. And now we can afford to help you transition. It will be good for everyone. Neil walked over to the coffee table, reaching for the ticket. Let me hold on to that, babe. Just until we figure things out. Wait, Oren said quietly. Neil looked up. Before you go celebrating too much, you might want to check something. What do you mean? Oren gestured gently. Read the name on the ticket. Teresa frowned. What Oren's voice was soft, steady. Just look. Whose name is printed on the top? Teresa raised the ticket, squinting. Then she froze. Neil noticed first. What is it? She read the name aloud, barely a whisper. Oren Peters. Silence fell like snow. Neil blinked. What do you mean? It says his name, Teresa said again, louder this time. This is not mine. This is Dad's ticket. That can't be right. You bought it. No, I gave him the money. He bought it. Neil stared at Oren. You bought this ticket? Yes. With her money. She gave me $5. I bought 3 tickets. 1 with her name, 2 with mine. Neil's face turned red. That is not how this works. Actually, it is, Oren said. Under state law, the person whose name is on the ticket is the legal owner. The person who hands the money is not automatically entitled to the prize unless agreed upon beforehand. Where did you even learn that? I asked. Teresa stepped forward, her face pale. Dad, come on. Be serious. We are family. Oren looked at her. His eyes were not angry. They were tired. Family. That word again. You said you were going to use the money for a lottery ticket. We all knew that. I used it for 1 ticket. The others were mine, purchased with my own money. But we thought, yes, Oren said. You thought I was still blind. Teresa stepped back as if struck. Neil shook his head. So you are going to keep all of it? Oren stood. He was not tall, but in that moment, he seemed to fill the room. You already showed me how you would treat me with the idea of money. I have no reason to believe you would treat me better with $30 million. Teresa's voice cracked. Dad, please, we need this. Oren picked up his coat, calm and precise. You have each other. That is more than I can say. He walked to the door. Where are you going to get some sleep? Tomorrow will be a busy day. Neil took a step forward. You think you can just walk away? Yes, that is exactly what I think. Oren paused with his hand on the doorknob. Tonight you both felt safe enough to show me your true selves. That was your mistake. He opened the door. Cold air swept in again, crisp and clean. He stepped out without looking back, and the door closed. The hallway felt colder than the wind outside. Teresa stood at the base of the stairs, the winning ticket still in her hand, as if afraid that setting it down would make it vanish. Neil paced across the living room like a caged animal. Every few steps he stopped and turned, eyes narrowing toward the front door that had just closed behind Oren. This is not over, Neil said through clenched teeth. Teresa did not answer. She was still reading the name at the top of the ticket. Oren Peters. She had seen that handwriting her whole life. Notes in lunchboxes, permission slips, birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside. It was undeniably his. It was real. Neil turned to her. We can fight this. We can say it was a gift, that it was agreed the ticket would be for us. Teresa spoke slowly, as if each word had to be translated from disbelief to reality. But it wasn't. He bought 3 tickets. Only one had my name. This one is his. Neil opened his mouth to argue again, but no sound came out. Somewhere in the background, the television still played, announcing how many winners across the state had matched some numbers. It sounded distant, irrelevant. Teresa sat on the couch, the ticket resting in her lap. I gave him $5, she said quietly. I thought I was mocking him. I thought I was doing him a favor. Neil sat beside her, both of them staring at the ticket like it was a living thing. He will not keep it, Neil said. We won't let him. He already has, Teresa whispered. Upstairs, Oren moved with deliberate care. He packed slowly, folding each shirt with the same precision he once used at the factory assembly line. Every movement was calm. No anger, no rush, just purpose. His suitcase was not large. A few clothes. His passport. A photo of Margaret in a silver frame. Her smile steady, timeless. He placed her carefully in the center of the bag, cushioned by 2 sweaters. The house around him was quiet. No knocking at the door. No yelling from downstairs. They were stunned. That was good. Let the silence carry the weight he no longer had to bear. He zipped the suitcase closed, stood up, and looked around the room. There was nothing here that truly belonged to him. Not anymore. When he stepped into the hallway, Neil was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Where are you going? To a motel, Oren replied. Somewhere with fewer expectations. You cannot just leave, Neil said. We need to talk. Oren looked at him. We have talked. For 3 years. And what I heard tonight was finally honest. Teresa appeared from the living room, her face pale. You do not have to do this, Dad. Oren's voice remained steady. You are right. This house is not mine. You made that clear. We did not mean it like that. No. You meant it exactly like that. And now I mean this. He stepped slowly down the stairs. When he reached the bottom, he turned toward the coat rack. His heavy winter coat, the one he had worn when he gave them the down payment on the house, still hung there. It smelled faintly of pine and dust. Teresa reached out almost without realizing. Please, let us talk to someone. A lawyer, a mediator. We can work something out. Oren slipped one arm into the coat, then the other. There is nothing to work out. Neil stepped forward. You are walking away with $30 million. No, I am walking away with my name on a piece of paper. The money is not what matters. Neil's face twisted in frustration. You cannot do this. I already did. He turned toward the door. Teresa's voice cracked again. What will people think? You leaving your own daughter like this? Oren paused, hand on the doorknob. They will think I made a mistake 3 years ago, trusting promises instead of actions. That mistake is now corrected. Teresa's eyes filled with tears. We are your family. Oren turned slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. Family is not who you share a house with. It is who makes space for your dignity. He opened the door. Cold wind brushed across the floor like a broom, sweeping away the last remnants of comfort. Do not do this, Neil said again. But Oren had already stepped outside. The porch groaned under his weight. The same porch where Teresa had once brought him iced tea on summer evenings. The same one where Neil had shared stories about plans and futures that never came. The door closed behind him. Not with a slam, just a click. Final. Clean. Oren walked down the steps, suitcase in hand. The streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. His breath puffed out in clouds. His pace was steady. Each step took him farther from 3 years of silence, of being invisible in his own family. At the corner he paused and looked back once. The house stood quiet. Lights still on. 2 silhouettes at the window. Watching. Waiting. He turned away. A few blocks down he stopped in front of a motel. Neon letters blinked vacancy. The desk clerk barely looked up as he signed the form and paid for the night. The room was small, but warm. A single bed. A lamp. A table by the window. He sat on the edge of the bed, the ticket now in his wallet, safely tucked behind Margaret's picture. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then he exhaled. Deep, long. No one called him. No one asked if he was cold. No one offered him tea. But he was at peace. Tomorrow he would visit the lottery office in Des Plaines. He had already checked the process. Identification, signature, option for lump sum, privacy request. It was all ready. As he lay back on the motel bed, Oren stared at the ceiling. The silence was not empty. It was honest. For the first time in years, he belonged somewhere. And it was not because of the money. It was because he had finally stopped asking others to see him. He had chosen to see himself. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but Oren did not mind. It was clean, quiet. The kind of place where no one asked questions as long as you paid in full. He liked that. Privacy wrapped in plain walls and thin blankets. 2 weeks had passed since the drawing. He had not returned to the house. He had not answered any calls. After the 5th voicemail from Teresa, he had blocked her number. Neil had left 2 messages, both sounding more angry than regretful. Oren deleted them without listening to the end. Each morning he woke early, walked to the small diner across the street and ordered the same thing. Black coffee, 2 eggs, toast. The waitress, a woman named Doreen with tired eyes and a warm smile, never asked his name. She called him Sir and refilled his coffee before he asked. It was a good way to begin a new day. When he arrived at the Illinois lottery office, he wore his nicest clothes, slacks, a dark coat, a buttoned shirt Margaret once picked out for him on their anniversary. He carried the winning ticket in an envelope and his photo ID in his inner pocket. The woman at the desk greeted him with a practiced smile. "Congratulations, sir. Do you want to take the lump sum or the annuity lump sum, please?" She nodded, typing quickly. "You understand that reduces your payout to $18.2 million before taxes, I understand. Do you wish to go public with your name? No, understood. We will file a privacy request. You will still appear as a winner, but your identity will be sealed from public release." Oren nodded. That was exactly what he wanted. When he signed the claim form, his hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the weight of finality. With each letter of his name, he felt another chain fall away. When he finished, the woman handed him a folder. Inside was a brochure on managing wealth, a direct deposit schedule, and the name of a financial advisor. "Patricia Willoughby," she said. "She is discreet and works only with private clients. I think you will like her." "Thank you." The entire process took less than an hour. He stepped outside into the cool December air, the sky a soft gray blanket above him. The sidewalk smelled of exhaust and cold metal, but for the first time in a long time, Oren breathed deeply and without weight. He did not celebrate. He did not call anyone. He took a cab to a small bank, opened a new account under a new mailing address, and asked to speak to someone about setting up long-term distributions. Mr. Morrison, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and quiet hands, listened carefully. "You are not looking to buy yachts or fly to islands, no. Just peace." "That sounds right." Mr. Morrison smiled. "Then let us begin there." 3 days later, Oren visited Lake Forest. He had seen a listing online, a small house with a view of the lake, 2 bedrooms, a fireplace, a garden in the back. The real estate agent had shown him larger homes, fancier homes, but this one felt like breathing. "I will take it," Oren said. "No negotiation. Full asking price, as is." The agent blinked, then nodded. It was the week before Christmas when he moved in. The air was crisp and clear. Snow dusted the yard like powdered sugar. The neighbors waved politely, but did not pry. The mailbox read Peters in clean lettering. It felt honest. He unpacked slowly. No rush. He placed Margaret's photo on the windowsill where the morning light would find her. He filled the kitchen cabinets with simple things, cans of soup, fresh apples, tea. At night, he sat by the fireplace with a blanket and a book. No television, no phone, just pages turning under quiet lamplight. He did not think much about Teresa or Neil. When he did, it was not with anger. It was with distance, like remembering a house you no longer lived in. One evening, as the year edged toward its final days, he stood by the window with a cup of tea in hand. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, soft and endless. "Margaret," he whispered, "you would have loved this place." The first months of the new year passed gently in Lake Forest. Snow came and went, leaving behind soft earth and clean sidewalks. The lake, just a short walk from Oren's back porch, remained steady. Some mornings it was glass. Other days it roared with wind. But it was always there, unchanging, honest. Oren had settled into a rhythm. He woke with the sun, made a pot of tea, and sat by the window while the light stretched across the kitchen floor. Some days he read. Some days he simply watched the world go by. He had not bought a new car. The old sedan still ran fine. He drove to the market once a week. The clerk there had begun to recognize him and always asked if he needed help carrying things. He never did, but he thanked her anyway. No one in town knew who he was. Just another older man living quietly in a quiet neighborhood. And that was exactly how he wanted it. He had hung photographs on the walls. One of Margaret in front of the Grand Canyon. Another of their old house, the one he sold to help Teresa. He did not keep that one in the living room. It stayed tucked in a small study where he kept his books and a worn armchair that matched nothing else in the house. His favorite spot was the back porch. Even in winter, he would sit wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the trees sway and the lake shift. There, the silence was not emptiness. It was peace. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a woman with silver hair and a tray of cookies. "Hello," she said with a smile. "I am Mrs. Henderson from across the street." I figured it was time to say welcome properly. Oren stepped aside. "Come in. I have tea on the stove." They sat in the kitchen sipping tea and sharing small stories. She had lived on the street for over 20 years, lost her husband 5 years back. Her son lived in Oregon now. She asked no questions about his past, only offered company and shortbread. "You are a quiet one," she said. Oren smiled, trying to keep it that way. After she left, he stood for a long time at the sink, watching the sun dip behind the houses. The light hit the photo of Margaret on the windowsill. For a moment it looked as though she were glowing. That night he began planning a trip. He pulled out a travel book about Tuscany. Margaret had always wanted to go. Rolling hills, stone villas, olive trees older than cities. He read about wine harvests and spring festivals, about train routes and local cafes. He made notes in the margins. At 68, he felt something stir. Not regret, not longing, just readiness. He would take the trip alone, but not lonely. The days grew longer. Birds returned to the trees. The wind carried the scent of thawing earth. Oren opened the windows one morning and let the breeze fill the house. He cleaned out the closet, donating clothes he no longer needed. He bought a small suitcase. Just enough for one man traveling light. He called a travel agent and asked for help booking flights. She sounded surprised by his calm. "It is just me," he said. "I am not in a hurry." When he hung up, he stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. The house made soft noises. Pipes shifting, wood settling, nothing demanding, nothing urgent. He walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of tea, and stepped outside to the porch. The lake glittered in the morning sun. A gentle breeze stirred the trees. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden. He waved back. Then he sat. Tea warm in his hands, the wind on his face, and the picture of Margaret just behind him. He closed his eyes. She would have loved Tuscany. Sometimes the most remarkable endings are the quiet ones, the kind that do not arrive with fanfare or applause, but with a man sitting alone on a porch, tea in hand, facing a lake that mirrors the stillness he has earned. In the final days of winter, as soft light filtered through the bare trees, Oren Peters found what many chase for a lifetime: peace without permission and dignity not borrowed but reclaimed. His journey was not loud. It did not require confrontation or revenge. It began with silence, endured through betrayal, and ended in the gentle certainty that truth has a way of finding its place, even if it takes time. He was once seen as a burden. He left as something far more powerful, someone who understood his worth and no longer needed others to confirm it. There is something deeply moving in the idea that justice can arrive without a gavel, without a courtroom, without shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a plain envelope, sometimes in the quiet refusal to be erased. Oren's story is not just about a lottery ticket. It is about what happens when a person chooses to believe in their value even after the world has told them they have none left. This story reminds us that we are never too old to begin again, not out of anger, but out of clarity. That even in our quietest seasons, we carry within us the power to walk away to begin again and to shape a life that reflects who we truly are. Like the last leaf that holds to the branch through the harshest winds, dignity can survive long after others think it has fallen. And perhaps that is the lesson worth carrying forward, that the people we overlook, dismiss, or consider past their time may be the very ones holding the deepest strength. That truth does not shout, it simply waits until someone is ready to live it out loud. In a world so quick to judge and label, there is quiet bravery in being slow to react and firm in one's self-worth. As we grow older, we often trade noise for meaning. And in that stillness, we may finally hear what life has been trying to tell us all along. Like a lantern quietly lit in a dark window, a single act of quiet dignity can light the way through life's most uncertain nights. So take a moment, breathe, let the story settle in your heart. And if this story has stirred something in you, a memory, a lesson, a feeling long buried, perhaps consider sharing it with someone who needs to remember they matter too. Sometimes the smallest stories leave the deepest footprints.